Thanks very much. I want to open it up to the audience right away, but before we do that, I just have two questions for Peter, following on from what everyone said. One, exactly what Dick was just mentioning, is it possible, what kind of time frame are we looking at here? Obviously the ETS has its own complications, but in terms of a 2030 target, what's feasible? Is it possible to bring the timeline forward? And then also in terms of what targets should be set, I think we generally hear some reticence about setting separate targets. From my left, we're hearing a preference for one single target, and then to my right, we have a preference for multiple targets. Where is the Commission right now on this?
On the timelines, it's in the Commission's work programme to do the 2030 framework this year. And indeed, if we're going to respect the request of the European Council that we do that, and then they come back to this in March next year, then it most certainly has to be done. We have to do it this year. So, I mean, we're working on that basis. The European Council conclusions also said, you know, that we would wish to see, the European Council would wish to see proposals. They did use the term with a small p, and if you're really know how to read English, that's a little bit ambiguous, whether or not it's just a proposal that Jason might make, or Dave might make, or legal draft law, as the Commission might make. But the fact is that we could do things this year, but it isn't decided that we will. However, it's also a fact, and we can't and don't want to change the fact that the European Parliament's last session, Romana can tell us exactly when that is, but I think it's first half of April or something like that. I mean, there is very little time for the Parliament, and they have, as the Lithuanian ambassador knows, and there's an awful lot of work for the Parliament to do that's on the table now. So for us to expect them to be able to rapidly adopt new legislation, I think is you know, a great leap of faith. But I agree with Dick about the urgency. I mean, yes, this is urgent because all the time that we're talking, all the time that we're not deciding to do things, investment decisions are not being made, or the wrong investment decisions may be being made. So the Commission knows all of the seriousness, but it's going to be doing the work with due process, and that includes all the impact assessment work, which is now ongoing, on what the framework of 2030 might look like. I would agree, indeed, by a comment that the ambassador said, it needs to be an integrated energy and climate, and I mean that is absolutely in the thinking of the Commission, and has been for the last decade. Let's be frank. No. I mean, it has. I mean, the climate energy package of last time was just that. And I was in the energy cabinet at the time and recall it very well, of course. The other question you asked, Dave, was what?
Multiple targets.
Multiple targets, yeah. Okay, I would say this. The Commission hasn't sort of got a formal decision made as to whether it should be multiple targets in 2030. But my Commissioner believes that the model that we have used, the triptych approach, or whatever you might call it, the three targets approach to 2020, has worked pretty well. She's ready to look again at the modalities of how each target is defined. But she believes that if we had only had a greenhouse gas target now, with the economic recession that we have seen unfold, we would have never seen anything like the same degree of deployment of renewables such as we have, and all the jobs in the energy efficiency sectors that we've seen. Those other targets have driven action in other areas of the energy portfolio. And it isn't at all evident that that action would have otherwise taken place if we had now been relying only on a greenhouse gas target. Because, of course, we would have, as the statistics show, met the target, and that would be a case of doing nothing more. And that, I think, would be a grave mistake from an industrial perspective as well, because a lot of our technology is good performing technology with regards to its energy efficiency and regards to the sort of technological development that's going on in the renewable sector as well. And those opportunities, we've got to think of them opportunistically.
Great.
There we are, David.
Thanks. I would just want to open it up to the audience quickly because the ambassador has to leave shortly. So before we kind of open it up to general questions, does anyone have a question specifically, a quick question specifically for Lithuanian presidency? Yep. Go ahead, Sandrine.
Yep, thank you very much. Sandrine Dixon-de-Cleve from the Prince of Wales Corporate Leaders Group, and it's a pleasure to have the Lithuanian ambassador here. Was just actually in your country last week with the commissioner talking about climate action.
It was warm there.
It was beautiful, and it has been horrible here since. I was in Bulgaria. It was also beautiful there. I think I'm going to move to Central Eastern Europe. I just wanted to indicate that the conversation that we had also with the minister was quite a positive conversation around the link between competitiveness and modernization. And the week before that, we were with the commissioner in Poland. And actually, there's been quite a change also in Poland with also 2 new reports that have come out. One which actually links modernization and investment in low-carbon technologies innovation as actually being quite positive for GDP. So the competitive angle is coming out very clearly, and also the possibility of growth and jobs. But in addition to that, there also was another paper which we're not talking about very much, which was the cost of adaptation, and we tend to focus on mitigation. But this actually came out, and in fact it was the Minister of the Environment of Poland that brought it up, that the amount of cost to Poland from adaptation is huge, and there needs to be a reassessment of that cost also when we start looking at mitigation opportunities. So I wanted to ask both yourself and the MEP whether, from your perspective, in order to come up with a real integrated approach and also integrate that into our green jobs, or just let's call it jobs and growth approach that we all want to see across Europe, what for you would be the key solution? What's the missing factor in what we have today in terms of our climate and energy framework? Thank you.
Well, thanks about the nice words on Lithuania. Of course, it's 22 and up all the time, so please. But the question, I think, is really very difficult. It is probably impossible to answer with one clear thing, what is missing. There are a lot of action have been taken. We need to really look at them and take lesson. For example, we have a very energy-intensive industry in Europe, which basically cannot stop emitting and reduce as much as we would like to reduce it. Either it stays in Europe or it goes somewhere else. And then we import the products just because they are produced there without any limitations of CO2 emissions. And then is it of our benefit, for our benefit? I doubt it. The support schemes for renewables were mentioned. Not every country can allow, and it's not for every country really to look for renewables which could reach, I don't know, 30% of the electricity, for example, production, because it would be simply unsustainable for the country's electricity market, for the other production, and maintaining that would cost more than really adaptation. We should look at adaptation, yes, but the costs will be. But everything should be really in one piece, and I would turn to Peter maybe the question how we can get from the Commission maybe a global assessment of all the things on one place, not piece by piece. And I apologize, I really have to go and
thank you very much for
everywhere 7 kilometers from here in
Thanks.
20 minutes.
Sure.
That's not possible.
Do you want to?
Okay.
Oh my God.
The answer, the question was about missing points. And I agree with you that the question is very complex and that we have to take care about several types of balances like adaptation, mitigation, national, European actions, global actions, and so on. But if you are asking me about missing points, I would rather say that we have something too much now. The system is over-regulated. it's very known mathematical principle that the system is not stable if you know too many, if you know how big are variables, if you know numbers for too many variables. This is known mathematical principle, and it works also for market regulation. We in European Parliament, in ITRA committee, we asked for a study to be made about the influence on renewables targets on ETS. And the result was that there is a big influence of different national subsidy schemes on ETS. Of course, if you have subsidies which are several times higher for reduction of CO2, then is the price of CO2 in ETS, that it has quite a big influence, and that this overlapping is not acceptable, that it influences quite a lot this scheme, and it could not work like this. So I think that the system is over-regulated, and that we have, in this way, we have to simplify it. And my other comment would be that assumptions are not correct anymore, because at the time when we adopted climate energy package, it was year 2008 and early 2009, our economy was of good health. We didn't face any financial problems. And of course, we cannot say that because we are facing now these problems with economical crisis, our CO2 reductions are much bigger, then we have to give bigger burden to the existing economy, which still works. So I think these are, in my view, two main points, what should be improved in our policies after year 2020. More flexibility, to be prepared also for another situations, not only fix the system for the situation which is for the situation which is currently, which we are facing currently. So more flexibility.
Does anyone want to start us off with general questions to anyone on the panel? Sure, go ahead.
Thank you. Mukund Bhagwat from copper industry. What we have not discussed, I think, is the ambition for lowering, in general, consumption. And let me clarify, when we talk of, for example, China, India, or developing countries, their resource use, if we compare to the resource use in USA or in Europe, is much lower. And of course, they are trying to catch up. So can Europe lead in showing less consumption to have the same level of, if we may say, happiness or prosperity or whatever? Maybe the panel can comment on it. Thank you.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think, Peter, this kind of goes down to the central question of, is one single target, can it help a situation like that, driving down consumption? Is there, when you're getting to that kind of level of, okay, we need to consume less, we need to be having change down to that kind of level, do you need very specific policies for that?
Well, I think you've got to be reasonable with what you can expect the Commission to do. We can't do everything. The comment's been made already that the situation is even more complicated. I think we are going to persevere with the toolbox that I mentioned we had, which is that we will have climate change policies, of which the emissions trading policy will be crucial. And we will also continue to support renewable energy. And we will also continue to promote energy efficiency. We've been doing these things before the 2007-2008 climate energy package, and we will do them into the future. So there isn't as if, we're not going to walk away from those policies. But of course, what we are trying to show in Europe, and I think what we have succeeded in showing, although, the clarity of that has been blurred by this economic downturn that we've been in. But we have been decoupling GDP growth from carbon emissions for a number of years, even decades. I mean, since the 1990 base year, we have reduced our emissions by 20%, Jason has said. And in that time, since 1990, we have increased our GDP.
40%.
40%, Jason says. I mean, check those figures. Check those figures, by all means. But don't be, overwhelmed by the economic situation we're in, which isn't good. And as I say, it's blurred the picture. But we've proven that decoupling our emissions is possible while still growing economically. And of course, it's by that example that we hope others can learn as well, because, we need to continue that process. I think also what needs to be done, and indeed, the Commissioner subscribes very much to this view, is that the world, the carbon-constrained world, is not a world where you take cold showers and you walk on your annual holidays to where you want to go and that you can't eat meat. That kind of world will never have the buy-in. And indeed, it's not the world we want. We want rather the world we like, and that's going to have lots of good things in it. And the theme of these conferences that Sandrine mentioned in Lithuania and Bulgaria was all about a campaign we're running at the moment called The World We Like. There are opportunities in this world. Think of those opportunities. We should be striving to obtain those from an industrial perspective, from an economic perspective. It's also a fact that a city that isn't unduly smoggy and dirty to live in and has quiet streets which are safe because they're, maybe traffic-free, pedestrianized, those are good places to live. And those sorts of things are the things that we want to put in perspective. We want there to be a world that that has great opportunities and a good environment to live in. And those are the things I think that we can honestly say are being offered by the agenda that we're, if you like, advocating. I think that's enough.
Did you want to add something?
Two comments. If you ask about leadership and where Europe should lead, I think that's a very interesting one, because that touches upon a few of the assumptions we had as well when putting all these policies in place. I think Europe's leadership is partly, of course, in the reduction of CO2 emissions in Europe in terms of the volume, the abatement we have. But we are already a limited share of world emissions by 11% or something. That will be halving anyway due to our relative position. So if I think about the contribution Europe can make to the world, it's probably most prominent in two fields. One is policy making. So the type of policies we adopt here and we develop here, can they be followed elsewhere? And that's where the cost-effective element comes in, of course. There's only one way that China, India, East Asian countries, and later African countries will follow European examples. It's when its policies are cost-effective. If they are not, if they are too expensive, if they are not coherent enough, they will not follow it. And for me, therefore, saving the ETS, apart from what it brings ourselves in terms of cost-effective CO2 abatement, I think it's very necessary for the rest of the world, because I see a model there. And despite no global agreements in place and Kyoto going under and potentially being replaced by something else, but we do not know that for sure yet, you see interest in the ETS. For example, in China, I think there's about 7 regional and local trading systems being put in place in China. Now you see it in Korea, you see it in California, you see it in Australia. So that focus on leading by example in terms of policy making. And the other one is, of course, in terms of innovation and the role we can play there for the rest of the world. And the type of policy we currently have is a bit neither nor. We don't really focus 100% on innovation. We do not really focus on the most cost-effective policies. And I think we have to get back into those tracks. One other element about why that cost-effective element in climate policy is so important. The focus on competitiveness is of course great at the moment, and see the discussion in the European Council, see the presentation by President Barroso to the European Council. I think that's good. I think that's excellent. But I do not think that should lead to abandoning of climate policies or say we are so close to 2020, let's bring in a pause and let's forget about it, because I think that will lead to higher costs later on. It will not give an example to the rest of the world. It's not something in view of climate change problem that we can afford. But the conclusion then should be, okay, but what is exactly then those mechanisms, those type of policies where we will be able to combine objectives around competitiveness, around innovation and around cost-effective climate policies. And we should really be looking for those and hammer those home. And around that there will be, for different sectors, other stuff in buildings or in transport. But for industry, for power, you have to have the ETS instrument, really focus on that and spend your innovation money on innovation.